Hull at Cambridge Botanic Gardens. It is absolutely lovely to be talking with you today, to talk with the Times newsletter of Botanical University Challenge. And your background is very interesting because it's in applying molecular biology to studying interactions between plants and arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, which sounds very lab-based and very technical. But now you coordinate the higher education and interpretation in the learning department of the Botanic Garden. So that's something really different. What inspired you to make this change? And how has your background in molecular biology affected how you take on this new role?
Well, I'm still very much working with plants, and in the same place as well. So I did my PhD here in Cambridge. I was looking at the relationship between plants and beneficial mycorrhizal fungi. I was primarily working on rice, that was our model plant, but I also worked on strawberry, which was a lovely plant to grow, very easily colonized by mycorrhizal fungi. And I also grew a sedge from the Tibetan plateau, and I grew that actually in the glass houses here at the garden. Many members of the sedge family, Cyperaceae, don't actually form mycorrhizal associations. So I was looking specifically at that. And I loved working on a range of plants. So I love the symbiosis because it's so universal. It's estimated to be 80% of all land plants that form this relationship with mycorrhizal fungi. So we're looking at something important since the beginning of land plants, since they moved onto land around 500 million years ago. And so I liked that kind of universality of it. And the stories that you can tell as well. I really enjoyed interacting with people about my PhD subject. It's a subject that's gained a lot of interest over the last few years, something we haven't known about for very many decades, really since the 80s. So there's lots of really great stories to tell about how fungi help help plants in the soil, and the importance of that relationship for ecosystems. So I really loved teaching and talking about that subject and writing during my PhD. And so, yeah, they were the things that I wanted to take through into my job. I did an internship at the Botanic Garden in Wales in my second year, I think, in the summer. So I was there half the time doing horticulture because I'm a keen gardener as well, and the other half I was doing interpretation. So I got my first experience of writing formally for a botanic garden, and I loved that. Exploring what stories you can tell about plants and how you can engage visitors with plants in the collection. And then the job that I do now was advertised in the last year of my PhD, so I just went for it. And then I actually worked the job part-time whilst I was finishing up my thesis for about 6 months. So I was doing two things, which was quite full on, but it was a really nice break to have from my thesis. I had a reason to leave the house and go to the Botanic Garden and do something different. And yeah, I've been here since then. And so really it doesn't feel like a big shift, actually. I get to work on loads of really interesting topics. It's quite research focused in that I do lots of mini research projects. So I've left the academic world, but I'm often having to find out about things that I don't know so much about. So it has that research element. And I also interact quite a lot with researchers in the department. So I don't feel like I've left that world entirely. It's nice to still be based in Cambridge, and based in such a wonderful setting, seeing all these plants from all over the world every day. I love that. That's what got me here. A real passion to talk about and share the stories of plants.
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean, people think that botanic gardens are just pretty flowers growing in beds, maybe with a few labels that say something about them. But it sounds like that you do more than that. That you bring maybe some of the more modern ideas about plants into the botanic gardens. Is that right?
Yeah, so it's a very varied place, really. And here at the garden, we have a collection of over 8,000 plant species, and they're from all over the world, many of which are wild collected and endangered and have particular research interest. And so, yeah, it's a place really to conserve and to protect and to celebrate that plant diversity. And yeah, the work that we do is very varied. So I'm working on a bunch of interesting things at the moment. Suppose the biggest project is I'm looking at the interpretation across the entire glasshouse range. So yeah, we have a beautiful glasshouse range, plants that can't be grown outside in Cambridge. So from high mountain regions to the tropics to arid desert environments. And we're looking now at what stories we can tell about those plants. So there's not that much interpretation in there at the moment. Beautiful atmosphere, but there's lots of interesting stories that we can share with our visitors. So I'm working with teams across the garden, primarily horticulture and curation, to pull out that information, work out what it is that we want to say. So that's a lot of fun. That's researching different geographical regions and environments and finding out about the climate and the plant adaptations and any specific plant stories that we want to share. And so that's on the interpretation side of things. Doing lots of small interpretation projects as well, looking at seasonal interpretation. So, for example, we've got lots of standing deadwood in the garden for biodiversity, and they just look like big tree trunks. So we need to tell our visitors what's going on here and why there's been hacks into the wood to create environments for different organisms to live in. So that habitat pruning, what's that? So small things like that I'm looking at. I've just launched a program called Plant Explainers, and that's with undergraduates and PhD students from the Department of Plant Sciences. And they will be volunteer explainers in the garden at garden events stationed near plants, talking about plants and the associated research. So I'm really looking forward to working with them. They're a really keen bunch, and about 45 students have got back to me. So I'm going to have an army of plant explainers going into the new year. Really excited about that project, and I'm looking forward to working with them.
It sounds like you've got a lot of scope for developing projects yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, within our team, we come up with a lot of ideas and work out what exciting things we could be doing, and how we can share the fun and the excitement of plants in different ways. There's lots to work on. Yeah.
You mentioned that the really nice background behind you that you can see in was part of a community project. So do you have a lot of interaction with people outside the university who are in Cambridge?
Yeah, exactly. We have a community project that's with over 70 community groups, and they come into the garden for workshops. This specific piece of art was done with a charity called Make Do and Mend, and they came in for regular sessions, worked with our community officer and an artist to generate this amazing canvas. So it spans from the bryophytes, the mosses and the liverworts down that end of the room, so the first plants on land, right through land plant evolution to the flowering plants at the other end. So we've got magnolias up there. It's a really beautiful illustration of how plants evolved over like I said, 500 million years. So we've had lots of engagement with this already. It's a really good way of piquing people's interest. So there's a really diverse way of there's lots of different ways in which people come to the garden and are connected with the plants and the work going on here. We also have a big schools program, and recently a grant that's allowed us to pay for the travel of school groups to the garden. So that's really increased the number of really increased the different types of schools that are able to visit. And I'm looking at increasing the engagement that we have with the university and other higher education and further education institutes in the area, all about bringing more people into the garden.
I mean, it sounds like you're really passionate about plants. Have you got a favourite plant?
Yeah,
So
so
something to
get asked this quite a lot, and I often say that I don't have a favorite. I find it hard to choose favorites of anything. But when I was thinking about it, I realized I had possibly a favorite habitat. I even find that hard to say with some certainty. But I love how plants fit together, and how they how they exist with one another. And I suppose that makes sense with my interest in symbiosis, which very much connects plants with one another in an environment. So looking more at the ecology. And for me, I particularly like how plants fit together in a meadow, so in native grassland ecosystems. And I mentioned that I worked at the Botanic Garden of Wales, and there they have some exceptional, quite young meadows that they started to establish about 30 years ago. And really, that was one of the first times I'd experienced quite a diverse meadow environment. And I couldn't believe how much plant diversity and associated invertebrate diversity there was in just a small space. Yeah, I particularly like in that habitat hemiparasitic plants, so things like yellow rattle and eyebright, rhinanthus and euphrasia, because I find it interesting how they work, how they fit within the low nutrient environment. So it's something that's also important for mycorrhizal symbiosis, but in a meadow, nutrient levels are low in the soil. And so plants have lots of different ways of adapting to those conditions. And the hemiparasites are one of those adaptations. So plants like yellow rattle will attach their roots to nearby plants, particularly grasses in that case, and they'll take nutrition, water, and some carbohydrates from those grasses and weaken those often quite dominant grasses. And that helps suppress plants that might otherwise take over that ecosystem. So leaving space for other plants, other non-grass flowers to grow. So really helping to create that diversity. And yeah, I find that so neat. It's one of the many ways in which they cope with low nutrients, and symbiosis is another one. So as soon as you elevate the nutrient levels in a soil, you block symbiosis between plants and fungi. It's one of the reasons why it's difficult to go back from a fertilized field, from an improved site to something species rich like a grassland, because it's very difficult to remove those nutrients once they're in the soil. But yeah, I find it very difficult to choose. Every time I learn about a family, I decide it's my favorite one until the next.